third session of the day of just presenting some information for return to school. And I appreciate you being with us. Just a couple housekeeping items before we jump into the material. We do have 18 slides to get through, which has taken us about 20 or 25 minutes, and we've left the time at the end for question and answer. And we have people joining us in this Google Meet, and then we've also had people just watch the YouTube link online without joining in. And we will post one out of these 3 sessions on our district website for people to view at a later time if they want. Just for those people who are on this Google Meet, if you can have your microphone on mute for the time being, and then at the end we will open it up for questions and you can unmute yourself. And if you leave your camera off, that is just fine, or if you want to turn it on, that also works. And like I said, this is being live streamed and it is also being recorded. So without further ado, I am going to jump to our presentation and start in. Purpose of the presentation is just to share our current thinking and planning as we prepare for fall 2020. And while we think the school year is only 2 months away, I think what we've learned in this pandemic and in living in the environment of COVID is that a lot can change in 2 months. And so we're going to share some ideas and some thoughts, but I would say with everything that we share, please know that there's nothing set in stone and circumstances may change as we move through this process. And the second purpose is just to hear some questions and ideas that you may have for this possible return to school. And we know that parent and student feedback is extremely important. And this won't be the last time that we check in with parents and students. That we plan to do this a couple more times while we're making our return to school plans. As some of you know, we've been in the strategic planning process phase, and we're continuing to move forward. And we've landed on a promise statement, which is in front of you, that we promise to provide a supportive environment where unique learning experiences empower all for their chosen life adventure. And I share this slide because in this time of uncertainty and unknowns, I think it's probably more important that we live our new promise statements. The idea of a supportive environment couldn't be more true and what is needed in this circumstance with the uncertainties and the possibility of changing in and out of remote learning or distance learning, and as well as learning here at school. And then the idea of unique learning experiences is also vitally important, that we are going to have to make sure we meet students' needs, whether they are at school or at home or a combination of both. As we've talked throughout this whole pandemic since March, mindset is really important as we move through. And I can't thank our community enough. And I think our staff has done a phenomenal job leading the way. The idea of how can I help? And I'll give you the example, like I've stated before, we've put out an email that our food shelf was running low and we needed some items. And within a day, we had our entry full of food from our community. And that's just one primary example of where people have stepped up and just simply asked the question, what can I do to help? The second point is the idea of keep giving grace. And this is a reminder for myself as it is for our staff and for our parents and for our students that circumstances change and people's perspectives are different. So whenever we enter conversations or discussions, I think it's a great reminder for us to look to understand first and to understand perspective before trying to be understood. And the idea of just giving grace, and people's circumstances are tough, and we just need to keep asking what we can do to help and keep giving grace. And the final one is, even though this year is going to likely look different than it has in the past, and in some view it might be a challenge, but I think our challenge is how to make this year into a great experience and how to turn the challenge into an opportunity. And I've heard nothing but positive feedback over the graduation ceremony that our high school principal, Mr. Grant Hansen, put together, which wasn't, let's be honest, from the beginning, could have been viewed as a terrible challenge in the circumstances that we were put in. And when Mr. Hansen met with students and parents, he was able to turn that challenge into a great opportunity and a great event. So I think that should be our mindset moving forward. Sonia Hyam, our school nurse, is on this call, so she is going to present some health information.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for attending tonight. We put the slide together with 3 very focused areas that we're going to try and plan for. We know things change quickly, and this could all look different in 2 months. But what we do know is that COVID, or the coronavirus, is spread mainly by droplet and aerosol. So that's coming out of when we're talking or singing, speaking, coughing, sneezing. Our tentative plan to deal with this during the school year is to promote physical distancing. So that's going to be a big challenge per se, maybe on the busing, and that's going to look all different. But in the classrooms and in student movement throughout the building, we'll be really focused on maintaining that physical distance and keeping the kids in their small groups. Another way that we can focus on limiting the amount of droplets or aerosols that spread throughout the school is by wearing masks or face coverings like face shields. We'll talk about that in just a second. What else do we know is number 2, that this is an easy virus to kill. So we're going to do that by cleaning, and that's some of our healthy habits, washing our hands and things like that. And we have added Mike Dashner to our team, and he is bringing lots of great knowledge and chemicals, if you will, and he's going to teach us, show us, model for us how to decontaminate the high touch surfaces. So our plan is to reteach actual hand washing that actually lasts 20 seconds, if you will, instead of just the mad dash to the bathroom and the kids are drying it on their pants. We're going to talk about coughing and sneezing and things like that, and then Mike will show us how to appropriately clean and then disinfect surfaces, the high-touch surfaces that are in classrooms, the hallways, the doors, etc. The third thing that we're going to focus on this year currently is screening for symptoms. We know that people can be exposed a couple of days and not even have symptoms before they start becoming sick. So there'll be a screening process for everyone that comes in the door. Currently, we are screening for the cough and the short of breath and things like that. And right now we're doing the temperature. Is that going to stay the same? I'll let you know in 2 months. But so our plan is to do a daily type of screening for everyone that's in the building, staff, students, any type of visitors, food service workers, you name it. The other part of that is making sure that we have awesome communication between us as the school employees with our parents. Not only do we want to talk about symptoms, but we also want to talk about, is there a potential exposure, for instance? Okay, sorry about that. Go ahead. So the second part, and this is a hot topic, and Mr. Stumpin and our admin team, we're going to work our way through this, and we're going to try and do our best, but safety is our priority. Right now, it's strongly encouraged that everyone that is coming into our building is wearing some type of cloth face covering. We also know that it's approved to a face shield. They work similarly, but not the same. But they're both approved by the Minnesota Department of Health. So currently, it's recommended, not required, recommended that grades 6 on up should be wearing some type of cloth face covering. Are they going to be wearing this the entire 7 hours that they're with us at school? Absolutely not. But in high traffic areas, maybe when they're moving around, when they can't maintain their physical distance, which is our primary concern, that's when we were probably encouraging cloth face coverings. We feel like those kids are mature enough to put the face mask on and not touch it and take it off appropriately and deal with that. The second or the third bullet is cloth face coverings or face shields may be considered for the youngers, but not necessarily the entire time. So we'll just see how that all goes and follow CDC and MDH recommendations. Mr. Stump, anything to add there?
I do, and we sent out our return to school student information survey. And you can already tell one of the strong points from community members is the idea of masks, and on both sides of the spectrum, whether we're requiring it or we shouldn't require it and we can't mandate it. So I do want to be clear up front. Things will change in 2 months. That's going to be a given. So I'm not sure what MDH is going to be requiring at that time. The second point that I'll make is that we are ordering masks for our staff, because just as important as students' safety and well-being as staff is as well. So we are ordering masks for our staff. And then the third point I'm going to make, at this time, they're not making it mandatory to wear masks. And they're even saying it's extremely difficult at the young age. So as of right now, it's not mandatory, but like I said, times are changing, and I'm not sure what it's going to be like in September when we reopen school. So I just want to be as clear as I can. This slide, the purpose of the slide is two things. Number one, on the left-hand side, it says JWP COVID-19 Preparedness Plan. And just know that this is a synthesized version of a 13-page document that is a work in progress, that we are trying to plan out every detail that we can about reopening school. And as our school nurse, Sonia, did talk about, healthy habits is one of the things that is going to be a top priority. And we know that we're going to have to do a great job of educating our students on hand washing and hygiene etiquette, such as coughing and sneezing. And actually, we've even laid out when we're going to hand wash and use hand sanitizer, and we have hand sanitizer in every room that will be made, that is available. The second target point that we're going to have is physical distancing and masks, and which has already been discussed, but we wanted to highlight the idea that it is physical distancing, 6 feet between people, and not necessarily the social distancing, because that's what schools can bring for students, and that students expect is that social connection on those interactions, and we know that those are important. And the third highlight for us is the supportive and structured environment. And that includes a lot of things, but we know we're going to have to plan what transportation looks like, and what pickup and drop off looks like, and screening protocols and contact tracing, and knowing what pods students are in, so that if we do have a case, then we can clearly identify what students are effective and communicate that out to parents. Some of our guidelines in our back to school planning is that we're going to follow the health guidelines. And again, those change frequently. So we will keep coming back to our community with more and updated information. We are committed to in-person learning for as many students as possible in the safest environment possible. And it's clear from the survey results that we have so far, and we have about 50% of our students that have responded, at least their parents have responded, by saying, yes, most of them, 75% of them, want to return to school. And so that we have a large percentage too that are questioning whether distance learning is best or in person, but we know our community is asking us to get our students back to school. The third bullet, we do recognize that we do have a population of students and families who don't feel safe sending their students back to school, even if the entire student body is back in-person learning. So we are committed to providing distance learning for those families that want it. Even if we are going to all be back in school, we're going to commit to you that we're going to provide distance learning for everybody who has that request. And the fourth one can't be understated enough, is that we want to provide an awesome experience. And I don't think any of us can imagine kids walking into school, sitting in desks that are 6 feet apart and not having much social interaction and leaving at the end of the day and think that's a positive experience. So I think the challenge again for us as a staff, and with your input as our community members, and I would say highly important, is our student input, which we're going to be seeking here in probably 2 or 3 weeks, is how we can make this year an awesome experience for them. The Minnesota Department of Education, often referred to as MDE, has given us 3 scenarios to plan for. The first scenario is in-person learning. for all students. And again, we'll get into these in a little bit more detail in the next slides, but that's the first scenario. The second scenario is what they're calling a hybrid learning with strict social distancing and capacity limits. And the third scenario is distance learning only. Before we get into a little bit more detail for each of these scenarios, I do want to point out that the Minnesota Department of Education, and I would agree with them, that they said that there's a high chance that we are going to see all three scenarios at some point next year, depending on the health conditions. So we have to be prepared for all three scenarios heading into this coming school year, which is great challenge for us. And know that we're going to come back to you and receive input, because some of those transitions might have to happen rather quickly. So that's why the planning for all three scenarios will be done this summer. Scenario one, the most forward one, is just the in-person learning for all students, where we're not necessarily going to be able to have physical distancing of 6 feet, but we are going to try to do our best to create space between students. Accommodate, again, for students who require distance learning, who don't want to be at school at all due to possibly underlying conditions or someone in their household having underlying conditions. And we're still going to prioritize, health precautions and hand washing and some of those precautionary measures that we know are just going to be beneficial, no matter the scenario that we're in. Scenario two is the hybrid learning with strict social distancing and capacity limits. And Minnesota Department of Education is asking us to limit the number of people in school facilities and in transportation vehicles to 50% maximum capacity and 6 feet between people. And if you can't meet the 6 foot standard, then you have to reduce the number of occupants. And we're going to get to a picture. I'll show you what that looks like for an actual classroom in a little bit, but just know that Mr. Erler, our elementary principal, and Mike Dashner, our director of buildings and grounds, are literally going classroom by classroom, measuring classes, and there's some formulas that they have to use and figuring out the actual capacity and then spacing desks out and seeing which one is less, and going room by room to see what our capacity limits are. The second bullet point is just said the hybrid model is designed to integrate face-to-face and distance learning activities. And we'll get to what that looks like per grade levels here in the next slide. So due to the space limitations in the classroom and on the bus, physical distancing expectations, we can't have all students back in school every day. I think that the classroom and the school, we're going to be close to getting a lot of students back every day, but the bus limits right now, according to the Minnesota Department of Health, is that you have to be 6 feet apart. So a 77 passenger school bus, if you have correct physical distancing, lessens that to about 13 students on a bus. And so it varies a little bit because we may be able to put families in a seat together. So that might be able to be increased to 17, 18, but it still greatly reduces the people that we can bring on a bus. So we're looking at ulterior options for transportation. And that's why if you took the survey, that's why that last question was on there. If you're able to transport your child, knowing that if you can't, that's just fine. We absolutely are committed to doing that as a district, but we just know that that's going to be one of those hurdles or challenges that we need to try and overcome. Our plan then, the second bullet just says students in pre-K, which is our kids corner, through some grade level, 3, 4, or 5 would come to school every single day. And we're prioritizing our elementary students because we know that that's where early learning is most important to build a strong foundation. We know that's tough on parents and having to work from home or having to work and come home and get their first grader on a Google Meet or try and help them with their homework. So we are going to prioritize the younger grade levels. And in this slide, it says 3, 4, or 5, but if we can go higher, we will absolutely go higher than that. In whatever grade we can go up to prioritize, depending on our transportation capacity, our classroom capacity, as well as our staff. And one thing that it's worth noting in this slide, just like we're going to have some students who don't feel safe at school due to underlying conditions, we know we can anticipate some of our staff having the same having the same insecurities with underlying conditions or people in their household. So some of this is going to come down to staffing abilities as well, and being able to honor both our students and our staff safety and well-being at the same time. And again, all other students who are not attending would be on a rotational schedule. So if we did every day, pre-K through grade 6 is coming to school every day, the 7th through 12th graders would be on a rotational schedule, and that is to be determined. And I'll get into the timeline in a little bit, but we just need to work with our staff on more about what that would look like. And the last bullet is that we may also prioritize older students. And I'll give you a couple examples. As we know, like welding is really hard to do in distance learning, as faxes as well. So we might prioritize some classes. We might prioritize just some subsets of students on an IEP who require individualized instruction. We might be extremely difficult to continue that with distance learning. So we might prioritize some of those students, or some students who aren't up to grade level standards, who need more one-on-one or small group instruction. We might prioritize them. I know we've had a couple staff meetings already this summer, and I had a staff member say that transition from 6th to 7th grade is difficult for some of our students. So can we prioritize grade 7 students in particular, especially early on? Maybe that's the first couple weeks where they come every day. So we'll be looking at all those options with our staff when it comes to planning here in July. The last couple points that I'll make about scenario 2 is that all students would receive instruction daily, whether it be in person or distance learning. And again, we do recognize that some students prefer to do distance learning, even if the rest of their grade is coming back. And we've already talked about transportation. Scenario 3 is the distance learning only, where there might require us to be in all distance learning for all students. And I'll say we learned a lot last year, and the feedback we're getting from our surveys too is going to be extremely helpful in our planning for what distance learning looks like in the future. Because again, we had some days to plan last year in March, and I think our teachers and our students and our families made the most of it, but we know we can do better. And so some of the feedback is just the idea of using one platform in the elementary, and we'll absolutely be looking into that, and lesson plans posted early. And I from the feedback we're getting from our parents, the idea of consistency, that teacher interactions and expectations and consistent ones would be helpful. And I just want to give you an example, though, how that plays out. I know we have different ends of the spectrum, where we have some parents who are saying, can we have more live Google Meets between teachers and students, because they need that interaction. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have families saying, I've got 4 kids at home and I'm working from home. We can't have that many live sessions. So can you video record them or just post them or have other alternatives? So we're trying to accommodate everybody and meet the needs of our students. So again, here's a picture of what a classroom with desks 6 feet apart looks like. I believe in this classroom we can get about 18 students in, which is probably a little bit on the high side of the classrooms that we've seen. It's probably more in the 14 to 16 range. But you'll see that all desks are facing forward, and that are 6 feet apart from chair to chair, both behind or in front and to the side. Common questions that we've gotten already is how will meals be handled, and especially in that hybrid model where we have some people in distance learning and some people possibly at school, we know we're going to have to provide meals for all students every day, and we'll be committed to that. The idea of, can my child participate in sports, PE, and music? And the Minnesota Department of Education has said that at the end of July, the week of July 27th, they're going to come out with what their guidance is for the start of schools. And we expect the Minnesota State High School League, who governs athletics in Minnesota, is going to come out after them with their protocols for sports, whether they're happening in the fall or not. Physical education, we know, is extremely important to students, and with the idea that outdoor is more safer than indoor, we're absolutely going to be looking at that. But we know that we're going to have to provide some awesome opportunities for students, and making sure that they have some interactions and some ability to play and just be kids. Music is one of those areas, I think, on a national level that they're investigating, and it's just not in Minnesota, that how can we safely bring back choir or band. And to be honest with you, right now, I'm not sure what that looks like or what that is, but I just know there's some national organizations who are going to come up with some recommendations on if and how that can occur. Does my child have to wear a face mask? And again, we've already talked about that. There's no mandate right now, or the Minnesota Department of Health has not required that. What's the health screening plan? And as of right now, we are taking temperatures and asking some questions out of everybody who comes in our building and who participates in a community ed activity, school age care, or athletic activity. What will an in-person school day look like? And this is one of the questions that is going to be tasked to our teachers and to our staff when we return in July, and that we're going to get feedback on from our students and parents. Because we know that we want to provide an awesome experience, not just one where you come in and sit in the same desk for 4 hours and go to lunch and re-sit in the same desk for 2 more hours. That we know there's going to have to be interactions and some time to be kids at school in a safe manner. And I've heard this question multiple times, just in passing. If my child isn't in one of those groups that attend school every day, can my older students be on the same day schedule? So if I have a 7th, 9th, and 12th grader, can they at least attend school on those same days? Which is a fair question, but at this time, I don't know the answer to that. And it's going to depend on what we're going to ask of students and what a student's day is going to look like when they return to school for those in-person days. Our return to school, last bit of information. You again have a survey that we're asking parents to fill out, one survey for every child, so we can get clear information and know exactly, for instance, in 2nd grade, 90% of our students are planning on returning. So we're going to plan for that. Or it's going to be different if only 40% plan on returning. So we want clear data, and we'll send out more information and get some reminders out to parents to complete that survey. And the next steps, our school district staff is going to be in July 20th through the 31st, somewhere in that time frame, for a couple days, just to plan those 3 different scenarios. The week of July 27th, MDE is going to release their guidance, and then we're going to come back to you and seek some input for our students and from our parents, and then release the plan. So know that there's going to be multiple opportunities to give more input. With that, I'm going to open it up for question and answers. And I know Sonia had to leave for another commitment. So I'm on here to answer some questions, and I know I see Jeremy earlier, our elementary principal, is also on here. So I'm going to pause and see if Jeremy has anything to add, or if you have questions.
Hey, Jeremy, Kyle Galen. Sydney and Isaac are my students. I've got one in 8th grade and one that's a junior. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Question. So I see the 3 scenarios. All come back to school, some hybrid model. I'm not sure what that exactly means. And then all distance learning. Which one is the school adopting?
There isn't a specific one we're adopting yet. We're planning for all 3 situations, or in all 3 scenarios. The state's going to give us more guidance towards the end of the month of what their recommendation is that we do. So, Mr. Stump, add to that, please, if you have any other information about it.
Yep, I could absolutely add a little bit more. I was on a call with the commissioner today as well with other superintendents, and what they have said is that they are going to recommend one of those models. And if you want to go away from the model, you're going to have to present some case or some evidence. And they're not sure what that process looks like, but I do anticipate more localized decision making. And like I said earlier, we're going to be committed to bringing as many students and staff back as safe as possible. So while we don't know exactly how many students that is right now, we just know that we're committed to bringing as many back as we can.
Okay. My second question then is, if you're going to accommodate the families that want distance learning, are you going to have the same accommodation for those that want their students in school full time?
We are going to try. With the big question that even we got in today when we had a planning session is, if we do have a case or we do have somebody with symptoms, there's likely going to be some protocols that, either shut down a group of students and force them into distance learning because there was a case of COVID within a group or there was symptoms. We're not sure exactly what those protocols are going to be, but we're going to, yes, try to be open as much as we can. But my guess is there's going to be some times where we're either going to have to shut a pod down because there was a case or a confirmed one, or some other circumstance. But yes, we're going to try that.
Thanks.
Hello?
We can hear you.
I have a question. My sister, she has looked into this a lot and how Europe does it. And what they do is there'd be a hybrid that they do it. They make little bubbles. So I'll say bubble A and bubble B, but you don't cross bubbles. Bubble A goes to school on all even weeks, and bubble B goes to school on all odd weeks, and each bubble has their own teacher. So therefore, let's say kindergarten goes to school on bubble A goes to school week 1, then bubble B goes to school week 2, but they have a different teacher. B has a different teacher or A has a different teacher than B. And see if they could just go like that, then everybody is confined within themselves. And then that would cause the problem of having the whole family mixed up.
Yeah, I think the foundation of our plan is to prioritize the pre-K through some grade and get as many of those kids back as we can. And then beyond that, the A day, B day, or if it's an entire week, I think that we're going to want to get a lot of input from our staff and from our students and from our community on what exactly that looks like. And some of that's going to be determined on how classes are set up and how we can think creatively. Knowing that there's a potential that we have to switch between some models between hybrid and distance learning. So those details have not been worked out, but I think Jeremy and the rest of the admin team can know we're constantly sharing ideas and late night emails of, have we thought of this, or what do you think of this idea? So I would say all options are on the table for how that rotation looks like.
Thanks a lot for that. Oh, and my daughter wants to say hi.
Hi.
Oh.
Hi, can't wait to have you back. I will pause again if there's any other questions, or Mr. Erler would want to say anything else.
Hi, this is Sarah Galen. I just have one question. I'm the stepmom of Sydney and Isaac, but I've just done a lot of research on education for my own son because we're homeschooling our 6-year-old. And I'm just wondering, I know the younger grades, when you guys are talking about having school and prioritizing, up through 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade or whatever, those are the formative years. You're laying such essential groundwork in their growth and their education. But then you go on to the rhetoric and the logic stages, which are the stages where our children's brains are putting all of that together. And that's where great leaders are born, because they're able to put all of that stuff together and then implement it. And I'm just wondering how we can be prioritizing a student based on age. It just seems like that's kind of a discrimination form because of an age group. And I'm just wondering how you guys all look at that and the logic phase and whatnot.
No, the logic behind it.
Oh, the logic behind that. Yes.
The question makes sense.
Your question absolutely does make sense. And I'm not sure there's a right model or a playbook for the best place for this. I would say I agree with you that the early learning is extremely important, because as soon as we have large gaps in learning at an early age, whether it be pre-kindergarten or kindergarten, those gaps are really hard to overcome as a student grows and throughout the years. So prioritizing those for academic reasons, for our community reasons, just because we know that those kids likely need some form of supervision throughout the day, and likely most of our community members are back to work. And like I said, my hope is that we can prioritize a little bit more, but a lot of that is going to be dependent on staffing and capacity, both on bus and in the classroom.
Okay, thank you very much.
Again, I will pause one last time if there's any other questions. If not, I want to thank you for joining this call, and please note that we're going to come back to you for more input and feedback as we continue to work through some of these plans. Thank you again. Enjoy the night.